Hey everybody, Spacewizard here. For this week's video, I want to talk a bit about card value and how it's calculated. The attack, health, and effects of every card in Hearthstone aren't arbitrary. There's a set amount of points that each card is distributed based on its mana cost, and very rarely do cards go over or under this value. You can think of this as a sort of budget for how strong each card can be, and there's a formula you can use to figure it out. Simply multiply the mana cost of any card by 2 and add 1. If it's a class card, add 2 instead. Chillwind Yeti, for example, has a mana cost of 4. Multiply that by 2 and you get 8. Add 1 and you get 9. So Chillwind Yeti has a value of 9. Attack and health are valued equally, so it gets a total of 9 stat points, 4 attack and 5 health. Since we multiply a card's mana cost by 2 to determine its value, every extra mana adds 2 points to a card's budget. So if we go up to a 5 mana vanilla minion, Pit Fighter, we'll see that it's just a Chillwind Yeti with +1/+1. If we go down to a 3 mana minion, Spider Tank, it's just a Chillwind Yeti with -1/-1. Abilities such as Taunt or Divine Shield take points away from a card's budget, and the cost of these abilities will typically scale with a minion's mana cost, and will sometimes vary depending on what combinations of abilities it has. But once you start dealing with minions that cost more than 6 mana, everything just kind of gets thrown out the window. I'm not going to go over every one of these, but what you're seeing now is the general cost of abilities that should stay the same unless Blizzard makes a sweeping balance change. Taunt, for instance, will pretty much always cost 1 point, so a 4 mana minion with Taunt would have 1 less stat than a Chillwind Yeti, and so we get Sen'jin Shieldmaster. If we go all the way up to 7 mana, where minions have a budget of 15 points, we'll see that Bog Creeper has 14 stat points left over since it has Taunt. Now remember that class cards get an extra point to spend, so if we go down to 3 mana, we can directly compare Spider Tank and Fierce Monkey. Although Taunt costs 1 point, Fierce Monkey can still be a 3/4 because it gets an extra point for being a class card. The only area where this general formula doesn't always hold true is when you're dealing with legendary minions. Every legendary in the game gets a certain amount of bonus points added to its budget, but it sort of varies from legendary to legendary because they all have to be balanced independently. In general, I'm pretty sure they get an additional 2 points added to their budget, but take that with a grain of salt. Now, in addition to abilities costing points, there are also abilities that can add points to a card's budget. Overload is the easiest example of this, but much like with legendary minions, the amount of extra points a card gets for having Overload is completely dependent on what the card actually does. Flame-Wreathed Faceless, for instance, has a total of 14 stat points, which means its Overload 2 must be adding 4 points to its budget. But if we compare that to Earth Elemental, which has Overload 3, but is still only getting 4 points added to its budget despite having a higher Overload, we can clearly see that the effect is valued differently for different cards. So that's the general gist of things when valuing mundane minions. But for minions that have interesting effects, things get a little more complicated. Let's take a look at Disciple of Cthulhu, for example. This guy has 3 points distributed to his attack and health, which must mean that his battlecry is valued at 4 points, since 3 mana neutral minions have a budget of 7 points. Now, we could easily just stop right there and that would be all you really need to know, but there's a lot more that goes into this. Let's take a look at Arcane Shot. It deals 2 damage just like Disciple of Cthulhu's Battlecry. It's a 1 mana class card, so it has a budget of 4 points. Now, I'm about to make a bit of a leap in logic, but follow through with me on this one. If we divide 4 by 2, we get 2, same amount of damage the card deals. If we head up to a 2 mana spell that just deals damage like Dark Bomb, which has a budget of 6, and we divide by 2, we get 3. So we can make the assumption that every 2 points is equivalent to 1 direct damage, which makes perfect sense in the case of Disciple of Cthulhu, since we already concluded that its battlecry was worth 4 points based on its missing stats, which means that the buff it gives to Cthulhu is an added bonus. Now, this formula doesn't hold up entirely as mana costs get higher, because we have cards like Shadowbolt that can't hit heroes, and Fireball which should only be dealing 5 damage, but these are all balanced decisions made by Blizzard based on how powerful each class should be in certain areas. In fact, a long time ago during the Hearthstone Alpha, Fireball originally cost 5 mana, which would make its effect of dealing 6 damage right on par with the formula of every 2 points being equivalent to 1 damage. It was later reduced to 4 mana because Blizzard wanted mages to have really strong direct damage spells. If you're skeptical, I'm putting up a link on the screen and in the description of this video to the Fireball page on the Hearthstone wiki. The patch notes are down at the bottom of the page so you can see for yourself. Now, if we want to figure out how valuable other kinds of effects are, we can compare cards of similar cost to one another. Let's compare Arcane Shot and Arcane Missiles. Arcane Missiles deals 1 extra damage, but the damage is dealt randomly. Since we already know the damage formula is 1 damage for every 2 points, we can make the assumption that the effect of randomly splitting damage adds 2 points to a card. 1 times 2 is 2, add 2 points for it being a class card, and then add another 2 points for it randomly splitting the damage, and you get 6. Divide by 2 and you get 3, the amount of damage this card deals. So let's compare this to a similar card of a higher cost, Avenging Wrath. 6 times 2 is 12, add 2 points for it being a class card, and add 2 points for randomly splitting the damage. 16 points total, divide by 2 and you get 8. Everything checks out, so we can safely assume that randomly splitting a card's damage adds 2 points to its budget. I could talk about this kind of stuff all day, but I don't want the video to go on for too long, so I'll just leave it at this for now. Understanding how cards in Hearthstone are valued can give you some real insight into how overpowered or underpowered certain cards are. If you're interested, I encourage you to head on over to Hearthhead's card database to try figure out how all the effects in Hearthstone are valued to yourself. That's it for this week's video, guys, but don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'll be back next week with another new video, but until then, you can check out Hearthhead.com or either of its social media pages for all sorts of Hearthstone-related content. See you next time, everybody.